Hi, everyone. You are watching The Self Connection with Ginny Brown and Kelly Pietro, where we have conversations with a group of ascended masters known as the multitude of the greater good.
The multitude of the greater good is happy to answer questions and impart their information. And Kelly is a wonderful question asker. So she asked the questions and I channel the answers.
Oh, thanks for being here today, Jen.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate your questions.
Yeah, so today, some of the topics we're going to talk about have to do with, let's say, the category of mental health, but Uh, the disclaimer is, of course, that this is for entertainment purposes only. It's not meant to treat, diagnose, cure, prescribe in any way. We just talk about the spiritual underpinnings that might be things to ponder, but certainly it's always advisable to work with a qualified mental health practitioner um, and not kind of use the internet to diagnose yourself in any way. So,
Or a physical doctor if you need it.
yeah, absolutely. A doctor, not a YouTube channel.
Right.
We are not professionals in any capacity here. We just ask questions. Ginny channels answers. The answers are not prescriptive in any way, just things to think about. So.
Right. Right. So what have you got today, Kelly?
All right, so I thought we would talk about the spiritual understandings of anxiety and depression. So let's make the first question to the multitude. Thank you, multitude, for being here today, as always.
Our pleasure.
Um, can they tell us what they would like us to know about anxiety?
It is important to understand that anxiety is the underlying, um, what am I going to say? The underlying, it helps. God, I hate when I can't think of words. It's the underlying, I don't know, it's the agitator, you might say. It's the underlying ability for one to take a look at those things within oneself that one is either unhappy with, wants to change, needs to move forward, or is indecisiveness about who they are. In our estimation, the indecisiveness about who they are is the in underpinning is what keeps coming up, that word. Um, it is important to understand that about being who one is on the earth plane is one of the reasons why one comes to the earth plane. One comes to learn, one comes to be, one comes to understand. And when one allows oneself to understand that part of self that says, I'm here on the earth plane, I've come to learn, I've come to be, I've come to allow myself to be myself and move forward in our estimation when one is not able to process that they are on the earth plane for a reason of being and for no other, one allows oneself to be like concerned about those earth things, those things about who I am, how do I look, how should I be, where do I go, all of those kinds of things, which of course are important on the earth plane, but they are not the be all and the end all of being. They can allow oneself to move forward in such a way as to say, oh, I like this and I like that, and I don't like this and I don't like that. Therefore, allowing oneself to know more of who one is and what one wants. In our estimation, it is important to understand that no matter what one says or does, there is always that part of self that knows. And when one understands it is that part of oneself that is it's unallowed to be, the anxiety persists. Not only does it persist, it expands. And when one allows oneself to say, okay, this is who I am, whether I like it or not. This is who I am, no matter what anyone says. It is important to understand that one moves forward from the perspective of self. And when one cannot, the anxiety takes over, as when one is able to move forward in a direction of love and care of self, then one is able to say, okay, no matter what, here I am, and this is what I'm doing. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay, that makes sense actually. So it sounds like anxiety can be the catalyst for someone to discover more about themselves. It's almost like, okay, I feel anxiety. What am I not acknowledging? Where I might be like out of alignment with what I like, what I don't like, who I am, who I am not, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's more than it is that, but I think it's more than that. It's about acknowledging that and then accepting that it's okay to be that way. If
Yeah.
one cannot accept who one is, the anxiety just builds and builds and builds. That's my opinion, basically.
So it seems like anxiety levels are at an all-time high, at least here in America. It is, I mean, I know for me, I see more clients with anxiety than anything else. And you hear a lot about, especially teenagers, middle school, high school, even young kids with anxiety and um, often heavily medicated. Um, like what can they tell us about why is there an all-time high of anxiety right now? And what is it moving humanity into? What is the purpose of that?
It is important to understand that when one allows oneself to be who one is, one allows the all that is to step in. And when the all that is steps in, one allows the frequency of one's energy to expand itself, therefore allowing the ability to be in a more it's like a more confident place, but a more stable place of being, more grounded. That's the word. That's what I'm feeling. It's a more grounded place of being. And when one is able to be in a more grounded place of being, one is able to move through life more easily. When one is upset about this, that, or the other thing, and allows themselves to, it's like to hang out in the energy of being as opposed to being on the ground, one is able to allow oneself to move forward differently. We can tell you the anxiety is allowing oneself to ignore parts of self, ignore the parts that are saying, hey, look at me, I need your attention. And when one cannot allow oneself the attention, or even the knowledge of knowing it is required, the anxiety builds. In our estimation, one is able to allow oneself to grow differently when there is anxiety involved. One is able to allow oneself to experience differently and to move oneself forward. In our estimation, anxiety is a planned measure of being. It is what one brings to oneself in order to allow the growth to occur. In our estimation, anxiety is looked upon as a negative on the earth plane. However, it can also be a positive. When one is in an anxious state, one is able to move forward in such a way as to say, I'm here on the earth plane. I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like what I'm doing. And I am able and willing to move forward differently. We can tell you anxiety is that part of self that is it's like a whistle, so to speak. It is that part of self that says, hey, look at me. I am able to do this, this, and this. And I would like to do that, that, and that. And in our estimation, that is the goal of anxiety, is to move one forward. However, on the earth plane, it is looked at as a a hindrance to one's being rather than a catalyst. Do not be concerned.
Wow. Okay. So what I think I'm drawing from that answer is like because anxiety is such a catalyst for change within each individual being, if my question was like, why are we seeing such an epidemic of it? It's like perhaps because humanity is,
It is important to understand. It is at an epidemic rate because each one is allowing each one's true self to move forward, therefore allowing the feelings to erupt, so to speak, which allows the energy to be in a state of it's like upheaval, but also of uh, it's more like it's not a balance. It's more like um, creating a change, allowing for change, allowing for the ability to move things forward. When all is well and good, there is no reason for change. And when there is upheaval, then the anxiety helps move the energy and allows the energy to move forward in a higher and greater way. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, they said it better than I was going to say it. It's kind of what I was going to say anyway. It's like
good.
catalyst for massive change
Yeah, yeah,
on like a broad level.
yeah.
If everyone as individuals is having anxiety and then having to face that and then having to eventually stand in their own truth, then we have a more authentic society where more people are standing in their truth in a confident way. That's also,
Again, for me, what comes up is acknowledging and even recognizing that there's something more.
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of times too, what I see with kids with anxiety is they're having to follow a mold of society. Like this is how we do things. You do this, you go to school, you sit still, you behave, you be good. This is what good looks like. And it's like they're having to like step in line, and it's like the old constructs don't work anymore because they're very kind of like forceful, forces you into these rigid boxes. And kids these days are like, but why? This is dumb. And you think about it and you're like, yeah, it is kind of dumb. And as a parent, you're like, I don't know why, because this is what we do. And then it kind of makes you think like, yeah, why are we doing this as a society? And things do need to change. And um, it's very interesting.
It is important to understand, my dear, that when it is that one comes to the earth plane, one knows why they are on the earth plane. And when they are free to expand themselves in such a way, they will allow the anxiety to dissipate and move themselves forward in the way of their choosing. In our estimation, it's important to understand anxiety is a lever, so to speak. It is that part of life that says, oh, there's more to me than I recognize on the earth plane level. There is more to me. Therefore, when one says, um, it is time for me to move forward in the way that I know how, one's anxiety will begin to dissipate as they move forward along their path. Therefore, the energy of anxiety will no longer persist as those things that are needing to be experienced and exchanged will be exchanged. Do not be concerned.
Okay, I was going to ask, and they kind of touched on it, but I'll ask it anyway in case there's more to share.
Yeah.
Like, what are some tips they can give for dissipating anxiety?
It is important to understand that when one stands straight and tall in their own shoes, they are acknowledging who they are. Whether it is that it is right or wrong on the earth plane does not matter. What matters is that one knows who one is, what one wants, and what one stands for. And when one can accept that that is a part of themselves and allow themselves to be in such a state of being, then the energy will begin to dissipate and the changes will begin to be made, whether they are changes in the like the worldly perception, the energetic of awe, or whether it is the changes on the individual perception and the energy of the individual. The energy will change, therefore creating change that is necessary and able to move itself forward. Do not be concerned. We can tell you, in our estimation, there is nothing more than we can tell you other than to recognize who you are, what you want, what you need, and move yourself forward in that direction. And when the anxiety appears, take a deep breath, allow yourself to be, and allow yourself to ground to the earth plane. Therefore, allowing yourself to move forward in that part of you that knows. Do not be concerned.
It's so funny as I was thinking, like, do I have any more questions on this? I don't really know. They were like, we have nothing more to share.
And then they shared a lot, right?
They did, yeah, no, I think this was really, really helpful. I hope it was. I'd love I'd love to hear if this is helpful for people. Drop us a comment. We have comments on.
Oh, you have comments on?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a big step for me and Ginny because I would have anxiety about comments
Okay.
and
Well,
people saying bad things.
I didn't realize comments were on. That's fine.
Well, you said when you're ready, Kelly, turn them on, so I turned them on.
Okay.
You can turn them off if you want.
Oh, no. Comments are fine.
Okay. Okay, well, let's have a similar discussion about depression.
Okay.
Um, what would the multitude like us to know about depression?
It is important to understand that depression is that part of self that says, I'm not right. There's something wrong with me. And I am not good enough or smart enough or brave enough or being enough. And when one gets into a depressed state of being, one cannot allow oneself to connect with oneself. One cannot say, I am here on the earth plane. I've come for X, Y, and Z, and I am completing A, B, C on my path to XYZ. When one is in that depressed state, one cannot allow oneself to be who one is. Therefore, we would highly recommend that each one in that state just breathe. Allow oneself to breathe, allow oneself to be. And when one can allow oneself the gift of breath and connection, one will allow oneself to begin to dissipate the disconnection. When one is able to move forward in such a way, one will move into a um, stronger sense of self and being and the allowance of love and care, not only of others, but of self. As when one is in love of care of self, it is the greatest gift one can give oneself, as it is time for one to accept who one is and move oneself forward in the direction of love of being. When one can accept who one is on the earth plane, and allow oneself, no matter where they are, what they are, or how it is they feel about themselves, to understand that they are on the earth plane for a reason. They've come for a reason. They've come to grow. They've come to learn. They've come to be, and they've come to allow. It is time for one to say, I am here. I am being, and I am open to connecting and breathing and being me. Do not be concerned.
Okay, so similarly, um, I'd like to ask the question about again, I can only speak to what I hear here in the United States is an epidemic of depression, that we seem to have a lot of people in our country that experience depression and younger ages.
Mhm.
What can the multitude share with us about? Is there a reason for that collective? It's not a collective experience, but for that increased number, is it a catalyst for something? What can they share with us about that?
Well, what I was feeling when you were asking was oppression. There was no freedom for them to be who they are. So it's an oppressive sense of being rather than a free sense of self.
That
Um,
makes, that makes sense to me because there's so much judgment in the world and so much virtue signaling and with social media, the comparison of do I measure up constantly? And what they said about depression is feeling like you're not enough.
right.
Um,
It is important to understand that when one can say, no matter what, this is who I am, this is what I know, one is able to move forward through the depressive state. When one says, oh, I am not feeling so well. Whether they know it or not, that is the intention of the depression. And when one can say, I don't like it here, and I am willing to change, then one is able to make that change of being. It is a matter of being willing and able, and each one is able, but not each one is willing. When one says, I am here, I'm moving myself forward, and I am willing to allow myself the growth required. One will allow oneself the growth required. We can tell you there is much oppression in the world, not only in the United States, and much oppression in the energetic uh, uh, I'm just feeling a compression, energetic compression of being. Therefore, one is not always able to access that part of self that says, I am willing. One does not even know that there is a possibility of willing change in our estimation. We would highly recommend that each one take the opportunity to allow oneself to understand that there is more to one than that which meets the eye. There is that part of self and spirit. And when one connects oneself on the earth plane with that one part of self and spirit, there is no end to what one can accomplish. Do not be concerned, all is love.
yeah, it's interesting. They often say that when you get to that really low state, which can probably be like equivalent to depression, that surrender, and often that's when people start praying, right? They in that desperation, and that prayer is like the connection to that part of you in spirit. God, whether you call it God or higher power or whatever, please help me. And then in that connection, that's where help can be brought in. Um, which is what I think I heard them say. But a lot of people don't, especially now. You know, I think when religion was more popularized, like the awareness of that, maybe in a certain framework was more prevalent.
Yeah,
But
I think you do that and you ask for external help. But I also think it is important to acknowledge. I don't know even if you can acknowledge, because you may not even be aware, but to know that there is that part of you that's in spirit, your connection, that you can make and allow the connection with yourself to make the change. It is the internal connection. And, for us on the earth plane, a lot of time is the external connection. The internal connection and the external connection are both helpful, I believe, but it's the internal connection for me. My understanding is that where our knowledge is, which helps us move forward.
Yeah. I guess I now see my internal and external as the same. Like to me, God is my higher power, which is part of me. And so I see them as the same, but I think under a religious context, I thought of it as separate,
Right,
you
right.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so with that then, what is it that how what would the multitude give us in the way of tips for handling depression or coming out of depression?
It is important to understand that there is much to be learned in the state of depression. If one is willing to learn, one is able to move oneself forward beautifully. We would highly recommend that one allow oneself to be who one is. It does not matter in depression, out of depression, in anxiety, out of anxiety, does not matter. When one says, "This is where I am, this is what I know," then one is able to allow oneself to move forward in a higher and greater way. We would like you to understand that each one on the earth plane has the ability on the earth plane to move themselves forward, whether it is in an anxious state, a depressive state, it does not matter. It is that part of self that knows this is who I am, this is what I am at the moment, and there is more to me than I can see at the moment. In our estimation, it is important that one understand that when one allows oneself to be who one is, when one is, one will allow the all that is. Therefore, allowing oneself the greater ability to connect with oneself and spirit. Do not be concerned. So, also, what I've learned when one can connect with oneself and spirit, one also connects with the all that is, which is all the guides, all the angels, all the help that one is looking for is in the, I don't know, I would say the personification that those we are looking for, like angels, guides, ascended masters, whatever, ancestors. But it's all the energy there that we are open to, which allows us to help ourselves, allows us to connect with ourselves and get what we need from the energy there. That
Yes.
that sounds confusing to me, but that's really
No, I get it. It's like your earth, the part of you on the earth connects intentionally with part of you in spirit, which has access to the all that is, which includes
access.
angels and the
Exactly.
masters, all that. So I think that's why the emphasis that you're talking about is the self, because the self can connect to everything. The self connection can connect to everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to all the information that we already have within ourselves that
Yeah, whatever we've gleaned from other lifetimes, that maybe we've overcome the same thing in other lifetimes, or we have tools from other lifetimes that exist within our spiritual self that we can access.
correct. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so they talked about anxiety being a catalyst for someone learning more about themselves, standing in their own two shoes, uh, understanding their what they want, what they don't want, what they like, what they don't want, where they're out of alignment, where they're in alignment. Is depression a catalyst for anything specific or just the same as anxiety?
It is important to understand that they are both uh, um, it's like on the earth plane for a reason. They are both able to help one move forward, some in one way, some in another. However, it is important to understand that they are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And when one is able to recognize the spectrum that they are in, one is able to move oneself out of it. Therefore, if one says, oh, I don't know this and I don't know that, and I'm happy being here, one will not move out of it. If one recognizes, oh, I don't like the feeling that I am in this state of being, one is able to move oneself forward. Whether it be anxiety or depression does not matter. The importance is to recognize that there is an acceptance or unacceptance of one's feelings, self, and allowing oneself to move forward. Do not be concerned.
I had a question. It just left me, I think. Oh, here it is. Okay. So we hear, I don't know if you've heard this before, Ginny, but I've heard anxiety is like worrying about the future, and depression is perseverating on the past. Would the multitude say that that is accurate, or is there more to say on that?
It is important to understand that it does not matter future or past. What matters is that one is in acknowledgement of oneself. And when one acknowledges one is in a state of discontentment, one is able to change the state. Do not be concerned.
Yeah, I think both of these can be very lonely places. So I definitely encourage anyone who's listening that's suffering with anxiety or depression, if you can work with a therapist. I wish I actually had some resources to like shout out right now about, if we do, we'll put them, I'll see if I can find some.
Isn't there like an 800 number or a
Yeah, that's what I mean. I wish I knew it. I feel like there might be. Um,
one or something like that?
I'll look them up and see if I can put them in the YouTube show description. Um, you know, like the multitude always says, sometimes we need the help of others. We don't have to be overly self-reliant in these situations.
Right.
Yes, it's great to connect to your spiritual self, but if you feel like you're not able to do that, like reach out for help.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
people,
And
even if it's calling a friend to start, but definitely a qualified healthcare professional could be helpful.
right, right. And to breathe and to the allow yourself the gift of helping yourself. Because I think sometimes we can get into a state where we don't even want to allow ourselves the ability to reach out. So just to breathe and get to a state of understanding. For one, you're on the earth plane for a reason. You came for a reason, and to allow yourself to pursue the reason that you're here. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that, Jenny. I think, you know, there's so much emphasis. I think social media exacerbates it, like, the idea of like celebrity and notoriety and success. Like society has all these measurements of what, of, and putting people on pedestals that can make someone feel othered and can make someone feel less accomplished. And what you just said is so important. Everyone comes here for a reason. It's not, you're not here by accident. And so there's something for you to accomplish for yourself
Right,
that contributes to the all that is, and to not minimize the importance of you.
right. Very important.
Yeah. So I don't have any more questions. Is there anything the multitude would like to close with? Or Ginny, if you have any questions?
Mm, I don't have any questions. The only thing what keeps coming to my mind is that if you look closely to a lot of these celebrities out there, they all of them, most of them have the underlying, um, whether it be depression or abuse in their lives or all kinds of reasons that can um, help one move differently. They're all there. They're just like everybody else. And they have their job to do to help themselves as we have our jobs to do to help ourselves. And we have all come for a reason. It is important for each and every one to understand that one chooses to come to the earth plane. It is not forced upon each or anyone. And when one is able to move forth from the knowing that they've come to accomplish something for themselves within themselves, they will be able to move forward beautifully. Do not be concerned, all is love. We would like each one to understand that when one comes to the earth plane and allows oneself to move forward, each one is able to say, I am here because I chose to come. Therefore, we would like to recognize the importance of each and every one on the earth plane. Do not be concerned, all is love. That was
Awesome.
nice. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to end this episode. Ginny, thank you for channeling, and thanks to the multitude for providing great insights, as always.
Yeah, you're welcome. And they are saying you are quite welcome. And thank you, Kelly, for being the catalyst with your questions.
Uh,
All right.
yeah, and everyone else's questions too. Feel free to send them in. The links are in the show notes. Would love to hear your questions. If it's follow-up to this episode or a different topic completely, we love hearing your questions.
Yes, I'm happy to channel the answers. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Self Connection.
Bye.
Bye.